we talked after the movie the other day about this. The film focuses on Republicans, but it's not like Democrats' hands are clean either. Election rigging has obviously been very spotlighted during the Democratic primary. It's not in the film, but can you kind of talk about the differences between when Democrats try to fudge with elections versus Republicans?
Yeah, and people said, oh, you're only taking on Republicans and you don't take on Democrats. Well, I do, but it's in the book. I can't, in an hour and a half film, which is half comedy, I can't take on everything. And the immediate issue here is 1 million black and brown and Asian Americans losing their votes. And so, but yeah, so in my book, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, I have also go after the Democrats. The difference is, and what's sad is that it doesn't matter whether it's Republicans or Democrats, it's always the same people, the poor people, students, and others who lose their vote, because almost all Democratic vote theft is not to steal elections from the Republicans, but to steal primaries.
Right.
So you have, for example, some of the worst cases of vote theft were organized by the Democratic Party of New Mexico, Hispanic Democrats wiping out the votes of poor Hispanic Democrats because the poor Hispanic Democrats would never vote for the Hispanic Democratic elite like Governor Richardson. You know, so you have splits in the Democratic Party, and as you saw, some of the worst case of vote suppression, as they call it, I've ever seen was in California during the primary. California, it's not Mississippi, but it was California where I'd actually never seen that many votes thrown away in any election in any state in America. The Democratic Party literally did not refuse to count over 1 million ballots cast in that primary. And that's why I questioned the victory of Hillary Clinton over Sanders. I'm not a Sanders supporter. I'm not an anyone supporter. I'm a journalist. But you know, and the media, like the Washington Post, not Young Turks. Young Turks is you know, has integrity, okay? But you know, if I had attacked Republicans, I might get something in the Washington Post. But because I questioned Democrats, I was savaged in the Washington Post.
Well, it was also interesting that all these states, Arizona, New York, California, the list goes on, everything that went wrong with people getting purged, all this only seemed to negatively affect one candidate. Yeah. You know, and a lot of these happen in closed primaries where Hillary Clinton might have more of a, open primaries where she might have a tougher time. So do you think it was the DNC? Do you think it was higher than that, or question remains?
Well, for example, in California, there's no question that the Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, is a Democrat.
Clinton supporter.
And Clinton supporter, set rules that would make it very difficult for independents to vote in the Democratic primary. For example, it was silly gimmicks like, you have a right as an independent voter in California to get a Democratic Party ballot. But he said, no, you have to get a special ballot that says crossover Democratic Party ballot. And if you don't ask, in most of the counties, if you didn't ask for a crossover ballot, they told you couldn't vote Democratic, you couldn't get a Democratic ballot. You can, but you had to ask for the crossover ballot. Poll workers are told you can't tell that independent voter, you should ask, you mean you want the crossover ballot.
Right.
So people were told they can't vote that way. Then the other problem is 40% of votes are mailed in California. So the independent voters didn't get the crossover ballot. By the time they figured out that they had to get this other ballot, it was too late, and they lost their vote, or they got a ballot and they said, well, where's Bernie Sanders on my ballot? They didn't understand that that's not, you know, and so what happened, and I got to tell you, Sanders people could have been smarter by educating their voters. You know what the problem was? These people are not used to being treated like black people. They're not used to being treated like Hispanic voters. They're used to be treated like privileged white student, upper middle class voters who never, you walk in and you vote. You get a ballot in the mail and you vote. Right. And they're not used to these tactics. And so Sanders did not prepare people to fight these tactics like you would normally, like in the black community. Lots of voter education goes on. Sanders didn't educate no one, and so the Democratic Party leadership under Jerry Brown took advantage. Right. Now, It's unusual. I mean, but again, so that was unusual because what made it unusual and got national attention is that it was white people losing their vote. But when black people lose their vote, that's like, hey, that's just another Tuesday.
Well, it's also, you look around the country, Rhode Island, not many people pay attention. The Democratic governor, huge supporter of Hillary Clinton, Gina Raimondo, 2 out of 3 polling stations were closed. Who does that negatively affect? New York, Governor Cuomo, supporter of Hillary Clinton. They have arcane rules. You have to change from independent to Democrat 6 months before the primary is held. Are young people paying attention 6 months before? There's no marketing for that.
Yeah.
So it seems that whether it's direct rigging or just subtly, kind of making the field uneven.
Well, I call it vulture opportunism. In other words, they know, for example, in California, they knew that 2 million voters were going to go in and vote, independents would go in and vote in the Democratic primary. And they knew that the system was going to make that nearly impossible. And rather than fix the system, they let the disaster happen. And I got to tell you, even when Katherine Harris removed black people in 2000, that purge system was not set up to elect George Bush as president. That purge system was set up to elect Jeb Bush as governor.
Right.
Then his opponent died, so he didn't have a problem. Okay, and they just left it there. And when they saw that that black men were being called felons, the company that did the purge for them, that came with the list, wrote them letters saying, here's the first list. It has, tens of thousands of names, but now we have to do a more, we have to now correct it and double check and make telephone calls. It's in their contract. They were given millions of dollars. Said now we'll do the next pass, and it'll go from 94,000 people, which is on the original list, it'll go down to maybe 900 people, and then maybe there's 9 people. And they said, oh, they looked at the 94,000 names, and they say BLA next to them. And see, in Florida and in a lot of the states, your race is marked next to your name. So they looked at a list of thousands of black men with BLA next to their name. They know BLA means Democrat. And so they just said, oh, we don't need it anymore. We'll use this list.
Right.
And that's how they didn't set out to do that. They took advantage of something that was there. So that there's no trail of how do we screw people out of their vote. They just say they know they're going to be screwed out of their vote, and they just let it happen. California in the primaries, Florida in 2000, and you're going to see this, like, oh, well, so for now with this cross-check system, well, we sent everyone a postcard. You say, well, why are you sending out 7 million people postcards for a crime that 4 people committed? And you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
And why aren't you looking at middle names?
And why, yeah. Oh, they said, well, we want to make sure that we got the widest list. Well, why? Did the police go out and say, okay, we're looking for a guy named Fred Thompson, and, Fred James Thompson, but we found a guy named Fred Eric Thompson, so we'll just arrest him, right? We'd be outraged, but not here. There's no outrage.
Good segue. Why isn't Greg Palast all over CNN, MSNBC? Why aren't they all over this with their army of reporters? Seems like, nobody's disputed your reporting, so it's a crime. Crime's going on. Why doesn't the mainstream media seem to think it has any priority at all?
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you on 2 things. I am the mainstream media. I report for the BBC Nightly News, the biggest news network on the planet. I report for the Guardian newspapers, the most respected English language newspaper on the planet. In fact, I just got off the phone with the Guardian for this article. I report for Rolling Stone in America. But you don't have reporters in America in these so-called mainstream outlets, these commercial outlets. You don't have reporters, you have repeaters. So they do press releases, and they say on one hand this and on one hand that. And if I get a story like this in it all, say, oh, they won't even say Greg Palast, say Democrats accuse Republicans of doing this, and the Republicans say it's not true. On one hand, this, and the other hand, like National Petroleum Radio, right? Why isn't this on NPR, right? I'll tell you why. Also, I tell it straight. See, they like words like vote suppression. Someone steals your car, they're not suppressing your car, they're stealing it.
Right.
But if you use weasel words like vote suppression, and on one hand this and on one hand that, they say fraud, but they say suppression, da-da-da, it's all bullshit. See, one thing I learned in Britain, there's no 2 sides to a story. There's the truth, and there's bullshit, And my job is to report the truth. If I ever came back to the Guardian and said, "Oh, I was looking at vote theft in Florida, and on one hand they say this, and on the other hand they say that," I say, "Well, which your fucking hands is the answer in?"
Yeah.
We don't want on one hand this and one hand that. We want your reporter, Mr. Palast, go figure out the truth and report it.